whatever line of business you're in, if your clients, if your customers are telling you they don't like the current system, they want something to be different, they want change, you're going to be better served listening to the complaints and adapting your business model. Episode number 32. Welcome back. This is the Expected Returns Podcast. My name is Stephen Lutman. I'm a real estate investor and agent here in the capital region of New York State. A lot of fun topics for us to cover today. However, before we jump in, just a quick reminder, if you are someone that enjoys the show, you're probably going to like our social media content as well. At sjlincolnrealty, that's the handle you'll want to search out. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and of course, the most active of our accounts is going to be Instagram. And again, that handle is at sjlincolnrealty. If you're a new follower, be sure to shoot me a DM. I love hearing from all of you. That's it for the intro. Let's get into the episode. We'll start today with what's likely to be the largest story in real estate for all of 2024. And that's the proposed settlement between the National Association of Realtors and home sellers. You may recall back on episode 28, we first touched on this. However, as a refresher, in 2019, home sellers began to file class action lawsuits against NAR, which is the umbrella organization that oversees all of the local associations of realtors, along with some of the largest real estate brokerage offices in the country, alleging that the two parties work together to keep real estate commissions higher than they necessarily need to be. Under the current system, when you hire someone like myself to sell your house, I'm going to charge you somewhere in the 5 to 6% range to do so. I am then going to take that and put it out into the marketplace. And I'm going to say, any agent that brings me a buyer, I am going to pay you, let's say, 3% of the purchase price. The current system works because as a buyer of real estate, you have closing costs. You have a down payment. You're going to be paying people like your attorney for representation. Adding a real estate agent into the items to be paid could likely prevent some folks from entering the homeownership ranks, may delay a purchase, or in some cases, may prevent people from ever becoming a homeowner. Where the system fails, however, is in terms of a buyer consumer, there is very little price discovery. And what I mean by that is because I am not, as a buyer, I am not incentivized to shop around. Because remember, I am not directly cutting a check to the agent that's representing me. My agent is being paid by the seller's agent, which in turn is being paid by the seller. I am not directly paying my agent. Therefore, I am not incentivized to negotiate on rates. This keeps commission rates higher, which also keeps property values higher. The other concern is something known as steering. When I log into my local MLS, the multiple listing service here, I can see property descriptions, I see property photos, what the property taxes are. I also see what the commission rate being offered is. The fear is that if 123 Main Street is offering a 1% commission, 124 Main Street is offering a 3% commission, the fear is that agents will steer their clients not to the best property for the client, but for the property that pays the highest commission. Once this system is changed and the proposed settlement, the proposal calls for changes to go into effect this summer, what options do you have as a buyer? You can hire an agent, and I hope that you do. And they will continue to go to battle for you. They will get the best possible terms, assist you through the transaction, and at closing, you'll either cut them a check for the agreed upon representation amount, or what I think we'll start to see a lot of is people starting to take on what's known as seller concessions. So, Mr. Seller of 123 Main Street, I was going to pay you $100,000 for the house. Instead, I'm going to pay you $108,000. And at closing, I need $8,000 worth of assistance for my closing costs. Okay, so net purchase price is still the same. The seller is walking away with $100,000. However, the purchase price is higher because the seller is going to be compensating the purchaser for some of their closing costs, which in turn the purchaser can use to pay their agent. So I think we'll see seller concessions or seller credits start to be implemented a lot more often. So there are paths forward if you decide you want to hire an agent. What I fear we'll start to see a lot more of is folks elect to go it alone, and not necessarily because they want to, which is fine. If you're knowledgeable and you're well-versed in the world of real estate, you don't want to pay a real estate agent. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I would still want you to hire me, but I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. The concern is that the other group is people who have to go that route. And if you're not super knowledgeable in real estate, how the system will work is if you decide 123 Main Street is the perfect house for you that just went on market, you'll reach out to the seller's agent directly. You will be negotiating with them. So it's going to be you, which could be, a novice, right? For lack of a better word, up against someone that probably negotiates real estate deals every single day, right? So a professional. So that's not great. You have a professional against a novice. And you also don't have the benefit of, in case things go wrong, you don't have someone to fall back on to answer questions. As a great agent, we should be providing quality attorney recommendations, property inspector recommendations. These are all people that, you could look in a phone book and find, 50 different ones, but finding someone that's great really requires someone that's in the streets of real estate every single day, knows who's good, knows who to stay away from. So if you are going it alone, you're kind of opening yourself up to a pretty negative experience. And if you want to go it alone, if you're knowledgeable, that's great. It's the folks who don't have an option that is, it's a bit of a bummer for them. As an agent, how do I feel about this? If whatever line of business you're in, if your clients, if your customers are telling you they don't like the current system, they want something to be different, they want change, you're going to be better served listening to the complaints and adapting your business model. There will be some agents that will not survive the new change. Without a doubt, there's going to be less commission total, like the whole bag, right? There's going to be the total bag of commission paid is going to be smaller. And there are some folks that are currently hanging on, whether they're part-time agents or, just they're giving it a shot full-time, they will be forced out. Where I think it gets really interesting is at the higher price point properties. Agents are going to have to justify their existence in a way that they've never had to do before. So if you're buying, let's call it an $800,000 single family house, an agent trying to justify a $20,000, $25,000 commission check from a buyer, that's going to be a very difficult sales pitch. Not impossible. The great agents will be able to justify why you should hire them. But it's going to be a much harder conversation than they've ever had to have before. For some agents, it could be a way to increase revenues. And the way I'm looking at it is I'm involved in a purchase transaction. Actually, I just wrapped it up where the price point was pretty minimal. And I ended up walking away with a check that probably at best I broke even on the transaction between gas and time and so forth, which is fine. I mean, the transaction ended up going really well and the person's really happy. In the future, I would be able to set a floor in terms of what commission rate I would be able to represent someone versus under the current situation, my pay was dictated not by my skills or not by what I said I was willing to work for, but I was paid by the seller's agent, whatever rate they decided to offer up in terms of commission. So going forward, I think you'll have some agents that seek a higher floor which again goes back to lower price points, lower income folks might end up being squeezed a bit harder than they otherwise would. But you will see some agents drop off. You will see some agents really fine-tune their game and being able to articulate why you should hire us, why we're worth every single penny we're charging you. And in some cases, might end up charging more, right? But again, at the higher price points, I think the conversation becomes a little bit more difficult. But in the long run, I think listening to your customer base, listening to your clients, ultimately is the path you want to go forwards. And clearly the clients, home sellers are saying, we don't like the current system, give us something different. And the proposed changes could make for a much healthier real estate market. Next, we'll pivot to a story that's a bit more local in nature. However, I promise wherever you live will be very relevant. Residents of the city of Albany within the past few weeks received notification of new assessments. And for some property owners, they say values went up hundreds of thousands of dollars. In some cases, values doubled. Obviously, folks are very riled up. I'm here to tell you it's okay. Let's take a look at what's happening, and then we'll dive into why the initial response is a bit of an overreaction. The assessor for your municipality is an elected official. This person in their office periodically, and in the city of Albany, I believe it's done every 8 years. This last round was delayed a few years due to the pandemic, but realistically should be done every 8 years. And they determine what they believe the market value for all properties under their authority to be. Each area will have what's known as a level of assessment, essentially what percentage of the market value of your home is used to calculate your home's assessed value. Now also at City Hall, we have the taxing jurisdiction, whose job it is to put together the city budget. How much money the city plans to spend over the next 12 months to keep everything running. Once this number is determined, all outside sources of income are subtracted. And whatever's left, that's the burden to be paid via property taxes. Let's do an example together. So in a small town, has a $500 million in total assessments. So it's a very small town. It has a $21 million budget with $1 million in outside income. Your house is said to have a market value of $200,000, and the city uses a 50% level of assessment. What is your obligation? So the first thing to solve for is, what is the assessed value of our home? And to find that, we're going to take the market value and we're going to multiply that against the level of assessment. So what is my property worth minus what's the percentage that it's calculated against, which is going to be $200,000 times 50% gives us an assessed value of $100,000. The next item we're going to solve for is, what is the aggregate obligation? And aggregate obligation being, what is the total taxpayer on the hook for? So we're going to take the budget, we're going to subtract out any outside income, and that what's left is known as the levy. So we have a $21 million budget, $1 million of outside income, leaves us with a levy, a remaining burden of $20 million. Okay. Next up, we need to solve for the assessment rate, also known as the mill rate. And that is the levy, which we just solved for, divided by the total assessment. So that is a $20 million levy divided by a $500 million total assessment gives us 0.04. Okay. Keep that in mind because we're going to use that next. Here comes the big one, personal obligation. What am I in the hook for? Well, we're going to take the mill rate that we just solved for, and we are going to multiply that by the assessed value of our home. So 0.04 times the $100,000 we solved for earlier means we are on the hook for a yearly tax burden of $4,000. So that's how we calculate our tax burden. Now let's examine what parts here are most important when it comes to a rising assessment notice. And this is what got everyone all riled up. We know that the entire city is being reassessed. So while my personal assessment may go up 50%, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? It's gone up 50%. That doesn't mean my tax burden is going up 50%. Everyone is in the same boat. Everyone's tax assessment is going up. All of the property values have gone up. Everyone's assessment's going up. What we do care about is how much our assessment went up compared to the median, right in the middle. You may have found yourself in a situation where you own property in an area of town that suddenly became especially hot, in demand. It's being gentrified. All the rich people are moving in. In that case, your property may have appreciated at a faster rate than the entire city as a whole. In that case, you can expect some change to your property, you will see some change to the tax burden in terms of paying more taxes because your property appreciated at a faster rate than the overall average. You would be paying a higher tax rate. What that also means, though, is that if you live in an area that maybe didn't appreciate as fast, maybe it's slightly less desirable to live where you live now versus 10 years ago. Even though your assessment went up 50%, 75%, whatever that number may be, you may be paying less in taxes because, again, your appreciation was less than the median. What are the components that are important here? It's not how much your assessment went up. It's you versus the whole area, but also how much is your municipality spending? What is the budget? How much is the budget growing? Because the amount that the city spends, that's what determines what the homeowners are forced to pay. So we're focused on how much does the budget go up every year and how does my property compare to the overall median landscape of what the real estate market in my city looks like. So while we see the headlines, people are all upset about assessments doubling or hundreds of thousands of dollars. It doesn't matter. Keep in mind what does matter. What's the city budget? How much is that going up? And how does my property compare to the overall spectrum of the city? That's what you want to focus on. Next up, a conversation about the proposed $10,000 first-time homebuyer grant. However, before we get there, a brief word from today's show sponsor, SJ Lincoln Realty, helping homebuyers and sellers throughout the capital region. I've been a real estate investor for the past decade and operate the office here as the licensed broker. If you or somebody important to you has a real estate related need in the capital region, let's connect. Steven at sjlincoln.com. That is my email address, or you can visit sjlincoln.com/book a call. And on the website, you can schedule a phone or a Zoom conversation with myself. Again, that's Steven at sjlincoln.com, sjlincoln.com/book a call. Let's get back to the show. And finally, we'll wrap up today with a question I received from a client recently. Should I wait to buy a house until the first-time homebuyer tax credit becomes available? For those who missed it, President Biden unveiled a plan to combat housing unaffordability, part of which being a $10,000 grant to first-time homebuyers. Here are the reasons I believe you are better suited to act now. Number one is it's very likely not to see the light of day. My understanding is this type of policy is not something the president can do with a magic, snap of the fingers. It's actually going to require congressional approval. And Republicans historically are not in favor of additional government spending. And also, you got to keep in mind, we're gearing up for an election season. And those on the right really don't want to give a Democrat any type of a win. So it's very unlikely they would be willing to sign off on something like this. Number 2 would be you're risking price appreciation. What if home prices outpace whatever you would receive in grant funding? Now, Goldman Sachs came out within the past month or so with a note that they anticipate 5% home appreciation during this year. And for much of the country, a 5% growth rate in housing would far dwarf whatever you would be receiving in terms of a $5,000 yearly tax credit for 2 consecutive years, as put forward by President Biden. Item number 3, what if interest rates move against you? Now, this one's a bit less likely. General consensus is that interest rates will either remain flat this year or experience a slight downtick. However, it's not impossible. If inflation remains at elevated levels, the interest rate cuts everyone is expecting could be delayed until an unknown date. Number 4, if you're going to wait, guess what? Everyone else is going to be in the same boat as you. Everyone else may also be waiting. So when you do ultimately decide to enter the market trying to purchase a home, in a world of efficient markets where everyone's game planning the same thing, you may be in a world of more buyers competing for homes versus what you would see today. And when there's more buyers, what do we know about that? It's going to take you longer to get an offer accepted. And it could also be at a higher price point due to the extra demand from the buyer pool. And finally, what if you don't qualify? And I mean in terms of the grant program. So details on qualification are a bit sparse just because it's more of an idea at this point. But they did put out an article or a post on the whitehouse.gov indicating what vaguely it would look like. But in terms of who qualifies, who doesn't, what steps would you need to go through to receive the funds, there's still a lot of blanks that need to be filled in. So you may think that you qualify. Ultimately, you might not. So there's a lot of reasons here, whether it's, you might not qualify, prices might get away from you. It's likely not even to exist. I believe you are better served buying a house now versus waiting for some hypothetical date in the future. That's it for today's show. I really hope you got something out of this. If you did, I'd love to hear from you. Shoot me a DM at sjlincolnrealty, Twitter, Facebook. Comment if you're watching this on YouTube. And of course, Instagram, you can always reach out to me. I love hearing from you. I love hearing what you like about the show, what you don't like. I really love questions. So if you want to shoot me anything that you want covered on the show, that's fantastic. And again, you can do so at sjlincolnrealty. If you're interested in Capital Region real estate, my email address is Steven at sjlincoln.com. And of course, sjlincoln.com/book a call. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. Hope you got something out of it, and we'll talk again soon.